Thanks for being here. I'll start by asking, just to get to know you a bit. If you don't remember my pitch from this morning, please stand up. Please stand up if you have not seen my pitch this morning. It's not my fault, right, if the thing is... Well, if it keeps doing that, I will probably stop streaming, right? Okay, so that was a trap. You please, no, please stand up. Please keep stand up. So this was a trap question, because indeed this morning I did not do a pitch because I was presenting with the government thing. So all the people who were still sit down, you have probably taken me for someone else. I'm sorry. I hope it will still be interesting. So now I will ask you, if you do not work in the software product development, please sit down. If you don't work in product software development. Okay? Now, if you don't do user testing, please sit down. If you've never done user testing, please sit down. Don't worry, just to get to know and to see how much time I must pass on each different parts. And if you've never done Guerrilla user testing, please sit down. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Now we can all sit down. Thank you very much. So this will allow me to calibrate the agenda. I will probably spend slightly over 10 minutes on vocabulary then, just to make sure that everyone shares the same basic concepts, contexts, and targets, and why we're doing all that. Then I'll spend 3 to 5 minutes describing what didn't work in our experience doing Guerrilla user testing, and 5 to 8 minutes on what actually worked. And if you do the sum of all that, it should be quite under 45 minutes, and hopefully that gives you plenty of time to ask questions. And I really expect you to ask those questions. I'll just give you basic stuff, and then we can all together define what you're interested in. So my name is Matti Schneider. I'm coming from France indeed, and I'm working at the French Digital Services Incubator currently, which is an incubator for state startups. That is, we create products with the methods and the tools of the digital startups from within the state. And that's how we intend to update the whole French government, basically, by showing what can be accomplished with these tools and practices. And what I'm going to talk about today is based on one experience that we had with one specific startup, which is called Boussole des Droits, which could translate to My Rights Compass. Its intended audience is youth from 16 to 25 years old, who might not be on the very usual tracks. Maybe they dropped out of university, maybe they have a hard time finding a job, maybe they have a hard time finding a roof. So basically, we are trying to connect them with all the rights that are available to them and help them activate that. And we, in the first phases of understanding user needs and testing the product, we did Guerrilla user testing, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So, what exactly do I mean when I talk about user testing? I'm talking about the lean startup practice. Hopefully you've heard about lean startup. If you haven't, you should definitely have a look at it if you're in this session. Lean startup should not be taken for lean, right? It's two quite different things. The lean ideas are basically to remove as much waste as possible, waste being very classified. I won't go into these details now. There's lean IT, and lean startup is basically what happens to the process of understanding a product and who we are working for when we apply lean principles. So how can we be extremely efficient at trying to understand users and market? So basically the goals are to validate or invalidate hypotheses about the needs, about the constraints, about the value that we intend to deliver to our users. We also do user testing to understand the domain that we are going to work on. That is, understand the symbolic world of the user. What are the words that the users put under the features or under the value that we intend to deliver, so that we offer something that is actually understandable by the user. And we can also create metaphors out of this understanding to make sure that everything is clear. And one final point that is extremely important to me in user testing is generate empathy from the team that builds the product towards the user. That is, it is very important that my developers go and have a chat with their end users, because they will be the ones making decisions all along the product development. Even if you have a product owner or whatever, you know that at some point there will be wordings, there will be some slight design choices that will be made by the developers. So you have to have the whole team in contact with the users. So now, in the specific context of the product, this compass thing, basically we had, when we started this product, 2 years of documentation that talked about the youth in the third person. Right? They want this, they want that, and always about people from the administration, what they had understood from the needs of the youth. It was never about the youth themselves describing which problem they had. So we knew that we had a very high risk if we built a digital tool based only on this basis, because you never know if you actually answer to the questions, to the needs of the user, of the youth, or if you answer to the needs of the professional that's there to advise him or her, or if you're just serving the public agent from the central direction, from the ministry, who understood all that and thought that the solution could be something. So that's why we really needed to do user testing. Now, what do I mean when I talk about Guerrilla user testing? So Guerrilla user testing is actually quite a sexy term that's there just to signify that we intend to apply the lean and agile principles to user testing. That means that we intend to maximize the return on time invested on the user testing. We want to be as efficient as possible with the time that we're going to spend with the users, because contact with the users is actually quite costly. It's time where you don't necessarily produce directly, and it also means that you usually have to go and meet your users, so you need to factor in the time for moving there. You need to make the contacts to have to be okay with like just going to people and asking them random questions. So you need to be quite efficient with that time. We also wanted to multiply how many cycles of learning and iterations we could do in this short period of user testing, so that we could maximize the impact. And finally, we wanted to minimize the administrative costs of organizing all this user testing. So that's why we call it Guerrilla. It means that we try to be as efficient as possible. And in this specific context, it means that we spent about 2 weeks on personas, on lean canvases, that is trying to get a basic idea of where our product was headed, getting a basic vision. And then we kind of got stuck, because we went as far as we could based on the documentation we had and based on our own assumptions. Doing more based on that would have been very risky, because we had not validated learning. So the solution to validate the learning was to get in contact with the users. So we just gave ourselves a deadline. We said, by next week, we must have met at least 10 young people. We must have met our users. So we just booked an Airbnb to have some place both where we could work and stay in the city where we could do the user testing. And we just sent a few mails to responsible people from youth offices in a distant city. So it's a bit as if you were developing a product in Vilnius and you just made an appointment with 3 or 4 different agencies or offices in Kaunas, and went there and just went there for 3 days, and you need to do that by next week. But what we discovered was that indeed we had been able to limit the amount of time and energy spent on the logistics. We were able to meet many youth, but we discovered that there were quite a few difficulties with the internal dynamics of the team when trying to appropriate this very aggressive method. Because one thing that's hard is sharing information when what you get is qualitative information. So let me just make sure that you understand, because I'm afraid that I'm going a bit too fast. You go to meet the users, you get to talk with them, understand what are their needs, understand what are their stories. And the thing is, you get maybe 5 or 6 persons in your team, and they will all interact with different youth, with different people from your target audience. So the thing is, at some point you need to put all that in common. And this is actually very hard to do, because everyone has heard different stories, and now you need to make this common knowledge. So this is hard. And the second point was that we actually had quite different sensitivity to uncertainty. So as I mentioned, we are working with people from the administration and from people from product management, and with developers and with designers. So all this transdisciplinary team was very efficient at creating a product, but it also meant that the people there were not always as happy with uncertainty and with complexity as the other one. So when we said next week we're going to meet all these people and we're just going to discuss with them, well, for some it was a bit surprising, and they not necessarily knew what to do when meeting these people, because they did not know how to build a software product. So with all this, this cultural diversity, we came to understand a few things that don't work and a few things that work. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. Did someone not understand a thing? Okay, who understood everything that I said? Okay, all right. Who did not raise their hand? Yeah, great. Okay, so I must be not so unclear as I'm afraid. Great. So, what did not work? Trying to have some theory. We tried to have this like half day, 3 hours, where we explained what was user testing and how they were how people from our team were supposed to interact with the users, how they should manage an interview. So we did that for 1 hour, explain to them, you don't ask direct questions, you just try to make sure that the stories are told, you take notes, and you don't ask what should we build, you just try to understand what are the issues the people are facing. We discussed over that, we had everyone rephrase. We really thought it was great, and it wasn't. It didn't work, because we think we did not leave any time for the people to actually get this into their minds. So maybe it can work, but you have to do this really beforehand. Doing it on the spot did not work for us. So if you want to do user testing with people who have not done it before, try to either prepare in advance or just accept that they won't be prepared. Don't try to prepare them at the last minute. So to compensate, we tried to have interview canvases. That is, we had written down some basic open questions that could be asked to the target audience. And it didn't really work, because we thought of it as some kind of emergency buoy. Like, you know, when they start drowning, they can always get back to the canvas and say, okay, I don't know what to say, here is the next question. But actually, we thought of it this way. It didn't work, because the people who were not at ease would never ask other questions than the ones that had been written. So it was not an actual conversation. It was, once again, very directed questions, and we could not make a lot of things from the stories. So finally, what worked was making pairs. We paired people who were new to user testing with people who were used to it. And we just sent these pairs to interact with the target audience. This worked because everyone has the freedom to write the notes however they wanted. And then we would debrief at the end of the day the observations of everyone, and we were able to balance all the observations. Even those who had never done user testing before were able to come back and give some hints about what they had understood. So we were happy because we had finally been able to get out of the building and meet the users, everyone. That worked, but we had actually just pushed the difficulty a bit forward, a bit later, because we said, well, we will put everything in common at the debriefing by the end of the day, but no one knew how to make the debriefing. So while a part of the team was still doing the user testing, two of us came back to the Airbnb and tried to think really hard about what can we do with that debriefing thing. And, well, we found a way. So the whole point was trying to synchronize the experiences, right? Trying to make sure that everyone understood something out of that day. So the idea is to share the results of all these individual stories that every person had with the target audience during the day, and try to make some general meaning emerge out of that. And we found a constraint of form that worked, and that's what we are going to see now. So the idea is that we had sentences with holes in it, and people had to share the stories that they heard with filling in the holes. So the first hole was the person, trying to characterize the person. For example, Sally, 26 years old, has been unemployed for the past 3 years. All right? So here, with this first post-it thing, the person, you try to define the user, that the story that you're trying to explain to the others, by giving the social or demographic or information that's of proper use for the product that you're trying to design. For us, for example, the age and the duration of unemployment were a good fit, but maybe it's not for you. So you need to understand what is a good way to characterize your users. So the person, when she tries to, for example, here for us, it was Sally, 26 years old, unemployed for 3 years. When she tries to register for a training, that was what she wanted to do, right? When she told her story, said, well, when I tried to register, she encounters some problem. What's that problem? She says, well, there's so much paper that I need to access my benefits. There's too much paper. So when she tries to register for that training, she encounters a problem. There's too much paper. That's why she needs to be helped with this. She needs someone that goes through all the paperwork with her. That's what she needed. But what she ended up doing, actually, was just abandon. She didn't register for her training because it was just too much. And she also tells that at some point, she will probably try to register again when the opportunity comes. So I've just told you the story of Sally, 26 years old, and with this constraint of form, we have actually found a way to make sure that everyone had the same information. And what I'm telling you now is the finalized version. But of course, when you are telling it to the others during the debriefing part, maybe you will have more details, and the others will help you remove all the unnecessary clutter. They will help you rephrase, and remember that you had pairs, so always two people heard the stories. So that other person can correct you if you misunderstood something. So this constraint of form worked for us. Now, after thinking about it, I think we can make it simpler, but this second part we have not tried. So if you try it, just let us know how it works. We intend to try the second version now, but the first really worked. So you end up with all these different stories that had been told. Maybe I will show it again, just to make sure that everyone has seen it. Each line here is a story, right? Make the link with what I just presented. Here is the characteristics of the user. Here you get 3 different stories for the same user, right? Always a story here. Problem, what she really needed, what she finally did, and something else, some other information that the person gave. Okay. So why do we write this on post-its? Because we're Agile, of course, and we like post-its. No, that's not the proper answer. Well, first of all, it forces you to be very concise, very short, so which is good. It helps for collaboration. That's another good thing. But post-its have this very interesting affordance in that they can be moved around. And that's where the constraint really shines, because then we could move the different parts around, and we could then use these moves to create new meanings. So what do I mean? When starting with the individual stories, here you really have to look there because it's going to animate and you're going to understand what we did with all these post-its, all right? So all these different parts, we move them around and we keep the problems and we cluster them, and we keep the solutions and we cluster them. So what have we done here? We're clustering the problems and the solutions that have been brought in by the users. Here we have not been thinking about anything. The only thing that we are doing is seeing similarities, right? Humans are very good at spotting similarities, but we are all pretty bad at thinking in someone else's shoes and pretending that we are that target audience. So we go to the target audience, we list all their stories, and then we just say, whoa, these problems, they really look quite the same, so let's just cluster them. We cluster the problems, and all the solutions that were in the same line, in the same story, we also put them on the same line. So we end up with these clusters, and we just have to name them. Of course, the team can guess many of the needs and of the solutions. For example, with this compass thing for the youth, we could have guessed that registering for training was something many youth needed to do, right? So maybe it was not worth doing all that stuff. Maybe for that case, but we can also make very important discoveries that can avoid very, very strong drawbacks later on. So for example, we definitely thought that get a job was a problem that they had. But when we did this user testing and this clustering with the problems, we realized that they were actually 2 very different, very separate problems. One was earning money, and another one was starting a career. And you know, when you think about it, when you're in your office, you're like, yeah, it's like getting a job. But actually, for the target audience, it's 2 very different things. You can both work on the side to earn money, and you can start studies, or you can start working in some other field, because this won't get you money now, but this can help you start a career. And being able to listen to the stories and understand the words that were used by the users was what made all this worth. All right, still with me? So we have these clusters of problems, these clusters of solutions, and all this has been brought in by the users. Now is the time where we use our great brains together and we just name stuff. We say, actually, this cluster of problems, we could name it like getting a training. We could name it like earning money. We just name things. And we also name the clusters of solutions. So for example, the paperwork thing, it might be like being put in touch with someone with a professional that can help me with my paperwork, right? So we just name things. And solutions are just solutions that help the users achieve what they wanted to do. That is, we did not come with a software feature saying, this is going to change your life. We're just taking the solutions that what the users wanted to do and that they couldn't do because of some problem. And we're just going to help them reach the solution that they thought about. We're not going to put forward a new solution. We're just going to help them activate the solution that they themselves thought about. And all these solutions, so these are the clusters here of solutions, now we can transform them into value propositions. So if you ever heard about Lean Startup, this is how you can create a value proposition. If you've never heard about Lean Startup, well, get to know it. But basically, a value proposition is an offer, right? Something like a short sentence that can be tested with different ways. So here, for example, is one value proposition. It says choose a training with video witnesses sharing my own experience of the training. So this is a value proposition, and basically we make hypothesis. We think that this could be a nice thing to offer. We think this could be a nice value proposition. And so in the coming days, you can then go to your target audience and ask randomly, hey, you know what, we're building a solution where we think that maybe you could choose your own training session based on video witnesses. And then afterwards, you could share your own experience with that training. How do you like it? And you iterate over that. That is, maybe the first person like, no, it doesn't ring a bell at all. Or maybe the first person is like, this is great, I want to sign up. And you will iterate, you will change the words, you will change how you present the thing until you reach a point where at least 8 people out of 10 say, I want to know more. Yeah, here is my email, just let me know when it's done. And if you never reach that point, after 1 week or something, just kill this value proposition. Say, okay, well, we had a few solutions that could be nice, but we couldn't find a value proposition that's worth it. So let's just try another one. Okay? So that's how, coming from the stories, we were able to make the problems and the solutions emerge, and then create the value propositions based on the solutions that were put forward by the users. So in our precise case with this product, we have been able to create 5 different value propositions associated with hypotheses that are here that we needed to test to know whether these value propositions would be worth. We prioritized these hypotheses based on the feasibility of the testing of the hypothesis. We created some interactive prototype, and then we had another testing session with other youth in another, like about 3 weeks later. And that's how we were able to start on Wednesday and go back on Friday with having seen about 42 people and having done everything needed to have testable stuff, testable product that we knew solved actual problems. Thank you for your attention. All right. So that was 25 minutes, which leaves about 20 minutes to repass everything in slow motion as needs be. So who starts with the first question? There's no dumb question. You can even ask me to like repeat something. There's no problem. It's quite a dense session, and it's at the end of the day. Yeah.
So first, thank you for the presentation. Very nice. But my question would be, how often do you offer to go to the user as a team? I mean, once per month, twice per month, or once per 2 months or something?
Well, we are being lean about it. That is, as needed, as often as needed. Which means that at the beginning, we went there maybe, I think, once every 2 weeks. But then at some point you get a backlog, and once you've converged on some value proposition that's worth it, well, you just wait until you have enough hypothesis that it's actually worth going to the user. You don't go and spend 2 days or 1 day with the users if you have one very simple hypothesis to test. Unless, of course, it's blocking. If it's blocking you, if you don't know any better, then go and test. But there's no reason to go testing just for the sake of testing, nor is there any way not to go testing if you're stuck because of it. Testing is just a way to attain the best possible product. But basically with such ways, we're able to decrease the cost so much that it's actually possible to say, hey, I really need to go testing. Let's do it next week. while in usual user testing, you're like, okay, I need to contact all these statistically significant population and make sure that they are available in the next month, and we're going to host a lab session and everything. If you do that, then you never do user testing. You do it once or twice, and you, like, fingers crossed, everything is fine.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. And I wanted to ask, how do you find the users? Do you look for a certain group or a certain experience, or you just look random people who never looked at your product and they are just looking it for the first time? Like, what kind of group is best for you for this kind of testing? Thank you.
Well, of course, they should be in your target audience. We probably won't test this thing for youth with retired people. But beyond that, it's always just a matter of which are the questions to which you want answers. So if your questions are like, how are the people who are less than 20 years old and who don't necessarily have a full image of the world understand with this product, then just go and ask them. So just define your target audience, like who is the best fit to answer to your questions. Now, how do we actually meet them? We go where they are. We don't send invitations and saying, hey, you can come if you want. We actually do sometimes, but because our target audience is people who are very motivated. So then it's a very good way to test motivation, right? Will that person take half a day off to just test something? But if you only send invitations, or if you pay people to do something, then you're going to have some strong bias in your selection. It's like probably unemployed people. If you do this during the time of the week and you pay people, it's probably either students or unemployed people. So if it's your target audience, fine. If it's not good. So we just go to the places. For example, for this youth stuff, we went to, I'm sorry, I don't know the word in English, but some unemployment forum, you know, like where young people could just come, and there are booths everywhere, and they can look at job offers, job listings, and they can have advice. Well, we just went there and asked random people, hey, you know what, we're doing this web application thing. It could be of use to you. Do you want to spend 5 minutes with us? And sure, most people actually do. We do this with youth, but we do it with all the kinds of users. It just takes a bit of courage, actually, and realizing that if you don't ask anything really hard from someone, and this is not really hard, this is just like spending 10 minutes using some piece of software and just telling you what they think of it, pretty much everyone will actually help you with it. Just go to some coffee shop, just go to the train station, just go to, I don't know, where people are bored and they have some time. Best place.
Anyone else?
But this is really important. This is all about overcoming your own fear of getting to people. You have to do this. This is the first step.
Hi. So maybe I actually misunderstood the topic before you started telling the story, but how this differs from the actually gathering user needs? Because all you were telling, for me, it sounds more like clarifying the user needs and gathering the requirements. Because at least from my background, user testing, I understand that there is already some product which they can, I know, see, touch, or try. So just maybe the question about the terminology, how it is different from
gathering requirements?
Yeah.
Well, because in the end we don't have requirements, so we don't gather them. That's just playing with words. No, I mean, of course, this part was more about understanding the users. It was not about showing some finalized piece of software, but it was guerrilla requirements gathering, if you want. The idea is you actually start working with that. That is, to some of these users, we just had these discussions. With some others, we showed some paper prototypes. To some later on, we applied the same principles to actually show working software. So The idea is just go to the users, and you don't need to be too serious about it. Just go, meet people, discuss with them. What I showed is one way to have this emerge very quickly. It's the only thing that's interesting there. If you already know about user testing, and if you already know about gathering requirements, it's fine. The only message I'm sending to you is just do it quickly, because there's no need to make this more complicated than it needs to be.